telling me I have a poor wireless connection, so...
You got it.
Okay.
Hi everybody, welcome to Zoo School Live. I'm Ian, and I'm joined by Keeper Phil here in the contact yard. This is our barn section of Elmwood Park Zoo, and today we're going to get to know the goats. As you can see, I'm surrounded by some tiny Nigerian dwarf goats and a Boer goat. So over here is our Boer goats. Boer is a mix between a pygmy and an Angora goat. We have two of them. One is Marlin, who you're following right now, and he just walked by Minnow. Minnow is the tinier female Boer goat. They just were shorn, which like a sheep, somebody comes in and shears off all their wool. So you're seeing them looking pretty bare right now, but 2 weeks ago they were big floof balls. People did confuse them for sheep, but I assure you they're not, although they are a close relative. And then you can see our 4 Nigerian dwarf goat kids. These guys are about a year old. They've been here for about a year, and they each have a very unique marking that helps us tell who's who. So here we have Sir David Attenborough. And he is all black and brown. Over here we have Charles Darwin, who's got like a nice little moo cow spot on his side. And he also has horns, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then we have Teddy, named after Theodore Roosevelt. And he's got a little armband, and he's got some spots, a white tail, and white on top of his head. And if he vocalizes for you guys, you'll hear that he does have the cutest little bleat. And then behind me we have Steve Irwin. And Steve Irwin has a couple spots on his left hip. So if those names sound familiar to you, that's because they're all named after famous conservationists. And we took the acronym GOAT, the greatest of all time, and then we picked 4 people who had done significant things for conservation. And those are Steve Irwin, Charles Darwin, Sir David Attenborough, and Theodore Roosevelt. If you guys look into them, they all really made great contributions to animals and land, and just really happy to have these names for these goats. And Phil, Keeper Phil here, is going to get into some specifics on goats now that you've all been introduced to our younger ones.
All right, well, as Ian said, we have actually 3 different species of goats here in the barn, but totaling, there's over 300 known species of goats, which is phenomenal. Most of them are derived, they believe they were domesticated over 10,000 years ago, coming from parts of Asia and Europe. Most of ours that we have here, like the Nigerian dwarfs, come from, their ancestors are from Africa. The Pygoras, their breed actually developed in the United States, and a kind of a cool fact about them is, as we said, they are a mix between an Angora and a pygmy goat, but they can be no more than 75% either Pygora or pygmy. So that's one of their breed restrictions. And then the other kind that we have here at the zoo is a Boer Goat, which she is the biggest of all of them that we have here, and the Boer Goats were actually developed for meat. So the reasons that we developed and domesticated the goats that you see today was for various reasons, but the largest ones being for meat purposes, for milk production, and for wool production. So we actually have a little bit of each here. So we have Prissy, who's coming out right now. Prissy, she's the Boer Goat. Her breed was developed to survive in places that are very arid, and they actually were developed for meat production. The Nigerian dwarf goats that we see all around us here, they were kind of developed because they were cute, but they actually have a very good ability to produce milk. And so their breed was established as a registered dairy goat breed now. And the Pygoras, as we said, they were shorn. They were bred for their hair capabilities. So it gets long. We shear them off, and then we clean that, and we're able to turn that into different fibers, such as Angora sweaters and cashmere sweaters, all come from goats. Let's see. So these guys, as you can see, are excellent climbers. So goats are one of the few ruminants who actually like to climb up to different parts and trees and things like that. These guys are what's known as a browser. So Whenever they're choosing their food, they like the leafy goods rather than like grass and stuff that's on the ground. They prefer shrubs and plants that are not usually found on the ground, but maybe a little bit higher up, a little bit more of the viney stuff. So these guys have the wonderful ability to be able to climb trees, and they're one of the few ruminants that can actually do that. These guys absolutely love chewing on things. Goats have the bad reputation of they will eat anything. They like to test things out with their mouth, and so they definitely do that. As I mentioned, these guys are ruminants. So what that means is that they have a 4-compartmented stomach, and what they do is they will eat a whole bunch of leaves and whatnot, and then that goes into the first part of their stomach, and then they actually regurgitate that back up later, whenever, in case they get distracted while they're eating or something like that. They'll regurgitate back up their food, rechew it, and then continue to swallow it and get those particles smaller and smaller, and then their stomach works on digesting that. It uses a lot of what's called anaerobic bacteria, which is bacteria that thrives in places without oxygen, so inside their stomach, and allows for the breakdown of the fibrous material that comes in the leaves that they eat. So it is not similar at all to our intestine or our stomach system that we have. We are considered a monogastric. These guys have 2 toes, so that's a lot different than the last time I talked to you guys where we were talking about donkeys. These guys actually have a 2-toed hoof, and those we actually have to trim down occasionally. So out in the wild, those would wear down on their own, but these guys in here, like this grit that I'm standing on, and the wooden surfaces that they have here don't really do a lot to grind down those toes. So every couple of weeks we take and we trim their toenails. As you can see, he also has horns. So many goats can have horns, whether they're male or whether they're a female. And what those, they're actually a part of the skull. And usually they're removed whenever they're really young so that they don't hurt themselves or others. What happens is these guys establish dominance by butting into each other, and usually whoever is the strongest wins. And so therefore they can do a lot of damage with those horns. So that's actually why at our petting zoo here we usually don't tell people to scratch them there or anything, because that encourages them to butt heads. And that's just part of their social dynamic. It's part of their what's called the herd dynamic, and you will always have a goat that's on top of the herd dynamic, so he's the alpha, and you always have somebody who's going to be the bottom of the hierarchy, and that is the omega. And it's weird to think about that because we usually think about it more in like packs of wolves and things like that, but it's true in almost any species that lives in groups.
So we are going to open up this gate and show you guys a new exciting part of Elmwood Park Zoo if you haven't been here recently. We open up a contact yard. So once we are able to have guests again, you guys won't just walk through the barn and reach over and pet them like you used to. You'll actually be able to go in and interact with the goats. So we're going to open that up, and you might see them get real excited and run, I hope. Go kids, you guys ready? Is everybody ready? Let's go. Oh my gosh, to the contact yard. So Phil was talking about how these guys are browsers and not grazers. There's a good example of something that we'll do for the goats here, which is we harvested some mulberry bush, and then I put it through the fencing here so you can see them browsing in action. And just about everything they do is adorable. One example.
So a fun fact about their browsing capability is that actually out west where there's frequent wildfires, people will take and they will use goats to clear out areas before the fire can get there. That way it slows down the spread of wildfires, because these guys they go in and they browse on almost anything that they can find, as long as it's some kind of weedy plant. These guys do sometimes eat poison ivy. They love multiflora roses, and things like that that are very much a pest to us and we can't do a whole lot about. These guys will eat them right up. So they're often used to clear out forests and woods, and they're also used to clear off fence lines between properties and things like that, because these guys are able to thrive on things that cattle and sheep tend not to, because they are more of your grazers, which means they enjoy grasses. As Ian said, these guys are related to sheep. So one about the only way that I've heard of that you can tell the difference just by looking at them, because you have sheep that have hair and you have goats that have wool sometimes, is if you look at the tail. Goats have more control over their tails than sheep do. So usually if their tail is erected, like you see on these guys here, they are most likely a goat. And if the tail is more in a downward, or their tail has been what's known as docked, that means that they are a sheep, usually. Hi, Teddy.
We got a lot of questions on here.
Oh, I can't wait. All right.
All right. Isaiah would like to know how many babies they can have at one time.
Ooh. So goats can have anywhere between 1 to 4 babies usually. It is most common for them to have 2 babies at a time. But I have personally seen up to 4, and having 1 is not too uncommon, but in most cases they have twins.
Sophia would like to know how old all of our goats are.
Oh, so the Nigerian dwarf kids and the Pygoras, so everybody you're looking at out here, was born around March of last year. So they just celebrated their first birthday. And then inside we have what we refer to as our OGs, which is short for old goats. We have Prissy, who's 14 years old, Dante, who's 8, and Opal, that is 7 years old.
Isaac wants to know if they have natural predators.
Yes, they do. So these guys are preyed upon by quite a lot that is larger than them. Wolves, bears, and things like that can easily catch these guys. And mountain lions, cougars, most of your large reptiles will prey on these guys. Or not, I'm sorry. Most of your large predators will prey on these guys, not your large reptiles. Although in some countries there are large reptiles that will also prey on these guys. So like your alligators and whatnot might wait, or crocodiles might wait by the edge of water until the goats or goat families can come up there, and they'll lie in wait for them to come in, and then they will eat them. So yes, these guys have a large number of predators.
Aaron wants to know how many goats we have here at the zoo.
So you've met a majority of them, I believe, right now. These 6 kids and the 3 OGs gives us 9 goats total.
Tyler would like to know if all the goats have family members at the zoo.
No. Yeah, no, they don't. They are all riding solo, but together they're all one big family. So 9 individuals that come together as a big family.
Anna would like to know how playful they are.
Well, they are super playful. They normally like running around. I'd run right now, but I'd probably look like a fool if they didn't run with me. But I'll give it a shot. Maybe. Do you guys want to run? Anybody? No? Oh. Nope. So normally in the mornings they will run around with me. I figured they wouldn't because we're on live Facebook. But they are super playful. If you look over in this yard behind Hollis, there's a lot of structures that we try to move around daily. And normally as soon as they're moved, these guys get pretty excited about it.
We also, you can see that there's lots of other toys in here. So these guys, they probably pushed that weird cube ball thing on the ground probably 6 times before we started filming.
Yeah.
Because these guys love to just play with things with their nose.
Yana wants to know how much they eat in a day.
We give them Timothy hay, and they eat as much as they want, which, orchard grass. And we give them a bale between 9 goats a day.
We got a real toughie on here. Gretchen wants to know who your favorite is.
Oh.
And also how old they can live.
Who my favorite is? I don't want to upset my coworkers here, but I'm gonna say Teddy. Again, I love Teddy's little vocalization. He has a real high-pitched sound. Not the cough you're hearing right now, but yeah, he's got the most cutest high-pitched sound that he's not gonna grow out of, it looks like.
And as for how long they live, usually goats live between 12 and 18 years, although there is records of them living up to 24 years old, but usually 18 is a really good number for these guys.
Megan wants to know who the oldest one is and where is she?
Oh, that's Prissy, our Boer Goat. She is right here. So this is Prissy. She is our eldest goat at 14 years old. And a Boer Goat's life expectancy is right around 14, so she's living out her golden years.
wants to know how fast they can run.
They can run about as fast as me, and I'm a pretty fast person. We have led them through the zoo during this closure and had them play in the playground, and I ran as fast as I could, and one of these little Nigerian dwarf goats kept up with me the whole way.
Preston would like to know how steep of a hill they can climb. Well, they've been trying on this.
Yeah, that's pretty
some
steep.
Some of them have been successful.
They are what's also known as sure-footed, so they are excellent climbers. And so I'm not sure what the actual steepness that they can climb is, but as you can see, this is pretty steep. This is almost at, I would say it's almost to 90 degrees, probably, I'm not sure, I'm not good at judging that. But
Here's 72 degrees.
Okay, 72 degrees there. And they were having success climbing up this, and to them it's just fun.
Yeah.
They absolutely love it. And that is a way that they can get away from their natural predators, but as I was saying earlier, it's also a way that they can get places that other animals can't, so that they can get the top parts of the trees.
People would like to know how big their horns can get.
So their horns will continue to grow as they get older and older. So like I said, these guys have been disbudded with the exception of him. He's the only one that still has horns because they were too big to be taken off whenever he arrived. But their horns will continue to grow as they grow. And like I said, they're a part of their skull, so they don't. So you'll see them. I continually keep growing, actually, and in some cases you'll see them, you know, with these big, huge horns that are much larger than the goats whenever they get older.
Alright. Lilia would like to know how many milk gallons a goat can produce per day.
Alright, so your average goats, there's, I think, 6 breeds of goat that are milking goats, and their average milk production is somewhere between 6 to 8 pounds of milk a day for a 100-day lactation period. So that means that they can produce 6 to 8 gallons of milk a day, or 6 to 8 pounds of milk. And if you know how that that 8 pounds of milk is about 1 gallon, so they, on average, can produce either just under to about a gallon of milk a day during their lactation.
Amelia would like to know if they live with any other animals.
So they live next door to our miniature donkeys and across the hall from our Jacob sheep. Occasionally we do let the miniature donkeys in with the goats. The only problem is that the donkeys love eating all of their orchard grass. So we have to keep them apart for most of the time. And the Jacob sheep have been in with them occasionally, but Jacob sheep stick to themselves.
Alright, it looks like White Marsh Elementary Kindergarten is here on a virtual field trip.
Wow.
So welcome, you guys, and I hope you're enjoying it. Mark, I maybe didn't hear about Fritzy. He's asking about the white goat. She looks different than the rest of them. What kind of goat is she?
Yeah, so she's a Boer goat, and that's spelled B-O-E-R, and that's why she looks so much different. She's a different breed.
Alright, and then it looks like Griffin would like to know how tall they are. So it's hard to tell me.
Yeah, I'm not sure how tall inches. They're about shin high.
Oh, we've got some questions about some excitement over these guys being shorn, and some questions about what our sheep look like shorn. So maybe we can get a snap of them before the end of what they look like, because all of our sheep just got clipped as well. So
yeah.
we can take a peek at them.
Yeah, they're ready for this summer weather.
Lighter.
How many pounds?
I said they look about 20 pounds lighter.
Well, that wool was about 8 or 9 pounds on each one. So let's see. Not any other questions right now.
You want to look at the sheep?
Yeah.
So, popping. So we're gonna head into the barn and see if our Jacob sheep want to come out. They are hanging out, the posse. So here are our Jacob sheep. They are enjoying some good weather, probably feeling a lot lighter and a lot cooler without all that fluff. That's Donnie that just ran in, followed by Twang and Honky Tonk, and then lastly we have Mercutio.
And so Mercutio has a really good example of horns. Like I said, they continue to keep growing. And his, you can actually see, he's got 4 horns. So these guys are Jacob 4-horn sheep. So these guys are kind of unique in that they have, anywhere from 2 to like 4 horns on them. But that's a good example of what horns would look like, at least the top 2, if we were to let them grow on the babies.
There's some questions about what we're doing with their wool.
Oh, so great question. We actually reuse the wool here as enrichment for other animals. So we have big cats like jaguars and cougars, and we will put that wool into their exhibit for scent enrichment. And I know you guys probably heard the word enrichment numerous times, but in case you haven't, that's us doing things that benefits the animals' lives via scents, food, sight, just general things where it's an enriching experience for the animal. So one of those is getting wool from our sheep, where predator animals love smelling that. As well as our non-predator animals. We'll put it in with Saki monkeys and our golden-eye tamarins, just as something fun for them to smell and touch.
Some of our birds will take and use it to build nest out of, and things like that, along with the monkeys as well.
All right, well, it's been a lot of fun here at Zoo School Live. If you guys have any more questions about barn animals, feel free to drop it in the comment section. Have fun for the rest of your day here.
It was great hanging out with you guys again. Have a good day.